I thank Her Excellency Gro Harlem Brundtland for her blunt and powerful words. I have the honor now to give the floor to Ms. Maria Ressa, 2021 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, award-winning journalist, professor at Columbia University, co-founder of Rappler online news site, and a fearless defender of freedom of expression in the face of constant political harassment and arrests.
President Baerbock, Secretary General Guterres, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm normally chasing you here, and here I am. It's actually a very interesting place. Look, 80 years ago, this institution was born to prevent humanity from destroying itself. Never again, after fascism manipulated information, eroded truth, and dehumanized entire populations to enable genocide and global war. Today, we stand on the rubble of the world that was, and the challenge is to rebuild the United Nations for now, for this moment, when similar forces that led to those atrocities 80 years ago are now surging through digital platforms, insidiously manipulating us for power and profit. The biggest battle we face today is impunity, and it leads to our dehumanization in both the physical world, where wars rage from Ukraine to Gaza, and in the virtual world, where our minds and emotions are manipulated by surveillance capitalism for profit. To fight that, we need information integrity to remind us to be human. I became a journalist because information is power. But news groups lost our gatekeeping powers when an atom bomb exploded in our information ecosystem, a technological one that's silently destroying the very foundations the UN was built to protect. This is the deadliest period for journalists in recorded history. More than 240 journalists killed in Gaza alone. More than died in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and the former Yugoslavia combined. This is unprecedented. They're targeted, and there must be accountability. We're living through an information Armageddon, where lies spread 6 times faster than facts on social media. That's a 2018 MIT study. It is so much worse today with generative AI. And the 3 sentences I've said over and over since 2016, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we don't have a shared reality. We can't begin to solve any problems, let alone the existential ones you heard from the speakers before me. We cannot have journalism, we cannot have electoral integrity, we cannot have democracy. This is manipulation of human behavior at the cellular levels of our countries. Algorithms reward outrage over empathy, spreading fear, anger, and hate, pumping us full of toxic sludge. Regulating technology isn't a free speech issue, it's about public safety. Because as has been proven time and time again, online violence is real-world violence. As a Filipino, I'm proud that my country was a charter member of the United Nations, one of only 3 Asian founding nations. Our commitment to multilateralism and peace runs deep. But that legacy was tested under the Duterte administration. Among the actions it took, it filed 11 criminal charges against me in a little over a year. Until today, I still need Supreme Court approval to be here. But I'm here. And my former president, well, he was arrested in March for alleged crimes against humanity and is detained at The Hague waiting for trial. Impunity ends. The rule of law, championed now by the Philippines as it chairs the 6th Committee on Legal Questions, ultimately prevailed. we move to it. The trends are clear. We are electing illiberal leaders democratically. As of March this year, VDEM said that 72% of the world is now under authoritarian rule. So we turn to you at the UN. It has its critics because you have to move faster. Security Council votes paralyze action on major crises. Outdated representation excludes rising powers. Bureaucratic processes respond too slowly to urgent threats. But as you know, the solution isn't to abandon multilateralism, it's to strengthen it by addressing the very impunity that undermines international law. At this time of creative destruction, I implore you to create. Here are 3 solutions. First, end big tech impunity through global accountability. We need binding standards for international to restore and regulate information integrity, just as we have for nuclear weapons and climate change. There are 2 new initiatives, first from the Vatican, created last weekend with His Holiness Pope Leo XIV, a declaration demanding artificial intelligence remain under human control with clear accountability mechanisms. The second one will be launched later today, a global call for AI red lines, which more than 200 of us have signed. We urge your governments to establish clear international boundaries to prevent universally unacceptable risks for AI, at the very least define what AI should never be allowed to do. Second, build alternative infrastructures for trust. It isn't just big tech that failed to protect the public in the virtual world. It's also you, the governments. At Rappler, we built a chat app using open source protocols. Countries that care about data privacy, France, Germany, all their government websites are on the Matrix protocol. It allows real people to talk to real people without manipulation. The vision is a global federation of trusted news organizations, because this is how journalism will survive and how we begin to build infrastructures of trust. Finally, the third one, create. Create, that's our word today. Invest in comprehensive solutions. Let your imagination run. 3 examples that's happening now. More than 3/4 of UN members now recognize Palestinian statehood, showing that international law can advance despite impunity. On gender, the Nobel Women's Initiative have pointed out, demonstrated that in nearly every conflict around the world, women are leading efforts for peace, defying displacement, patriarchy, gender apartheid, and militarized violence every day. And finally, on Wednesday, Demokrasya Siyempre, 20 nations will pledge to strengthen democratic institutions and fight for information integrity. More than 40 Nobel laureates we have gathered together to support this multilateral initiative led by the Global South. Information integrity is the mother of all battles. Win this, and we can win the rest. Lose this, and we lose everything. Please choose courage over comfort, facts over fiction, hope over fear. A lot has changed since the UN was created 80 years ago. But its values, peace, human rights, justice, rule of law, these are more essential today than ever. It is time to create again, to build better, together. Please act now, before it's too late. Thank you.
I thank Maria Ressa also for her very powerful words. I now invite Ms. Mariam Burka, United Nations Global Advocate for Peace and youth leader, whose work bridges art, activism, championing women's rights, youth empowerment, and peace building, to recite a poem.
The President, Secretary General, distinguished delegates, excellencies, good morning. Walking these halls, I realized that the United Nations was not built from harmony. It grew out of the ashes of war and the grief watered by the collective memory of what happens when dialogue and cooperation fails. Its foundation is not peace achieved, but peace pursued, fragile, imperfect, necessary, not just worth fighting for, but requiring a fight. And today, 80 years on, we gather to honor what has been achieved. Nations rebuilt, walls of division lowered, millions lifted by the shared will. But these are victories worth remembering, but the story is unfinished. The cracks in the foundation calls us to repair, to act, not to retreat. Our world bleeds before our eyes. Children in conflict zones, nations silenced by hunger and war. And it begs the question, are we witnessing the collapse of conscience in real time? Because behind every pact, there are people. Behind every statistic, there is a story. And behind every commitment that we sign, there are lives depending on whether we honor our words or not. And so this is not the time to feel powerless, because yes, hope and despair can coexist in the same breath, because healing is not linear. The United Nations is not a monument, it is a mirror, and it reflects what we have dared to imagine 80 years ago, and today, here, it asks, will we dare again? Will we dare to work better together? Because if the past proves that we can build peace from ashes, then the present demands that we build it again, louder, braver, together. I speak as a global peace advocate, not because peace is easy, but because silence is complicity, and so I will not be silent. You know, I used to think that peace was a place, a final destination we arrive at after all wars have ended. But I have come to understand that peace is not a line that we cross. It is a choice that we make over and over and over again, especially when it is the hardest, especially when it feels far away. Peace is not a silence we force into people's mouths. It is not the absence of war, but the presence of understanding. Peace is a child learning to sleep again without flinching at the wind. It is a mother not having to choose between bread and dignity. It is a father not having to swallow his voice to feel like a man. Peace is messy, like forgiveness. It does not arrive in parade floats. Sometimes it comes crawling through broken windows when we finally agree that being right is not better than being whole. Peace is not found, it is built, brick by brutal brick, by hands that once knew how to fight, now choose to hold instead. There was a time when we measured strength by how long we could hold a grudge, but today, let us measure strength by how long we could hold space for someone else's truth. Because there was a me and a you before there was ever an us. And if us is broken, then peace is what lets us lay down the shards without aiming at each other's throats. Peace is the poem you write after the war in your chest has finally run out of ink. It is the moment you return to your body and find yourself still standing. Peace is not easy. And so let us not forget the ones who have carried peace quietly through the fire. The women whose hands mend what war has torn, who rebuild homes from memory, raise children between checkpoints, hold their families like nation, because peace has always known the name of a woman, carried through the way that she chooses courage over collapse again and again. And so today I speak peace into the bones of this world, into the rubble, into the rage, into the ruins. Because if war teaches us how to shatter, then peace must teach us how to stay soft, to stay human. And perhaps what makes us human is not that we always succeed in peace, but that we dare again and again to seek it, refusing to let our brokenness be the end of our story. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Burkhan, and as we conclude and after listening to this beautiful poem, let me emphasize again, peace is only a word and better together is only a slogan until we embrace it. So I invite you to embrace and live up to be better together over this 80th session.
This is not the story of an institution. It's the story of people. People who stood between war and peace and chose peace. People who said, dignity cannot be broken. People who carried food on their backs, who rebuilt schools, who gave shelter to strangers. People who stood for the earth before it was too late. And the people who will carry it forward. The young, the unheard, the unstoppable. For 80 years, this has been and will be the work of humanity. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. 80 years and more for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. UN. Better together.
Before adjourning this meeting, I would like to remind delegation that the high-level meeting on the 30th anniversary of Fourth World Conference on Women will begin immediately in this hall. Delegations are therefore requested to remain seated while the stage is being prepared for the next meeting. The high-level plenary meeting to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations has concluded. I thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
Is your growth strategy a big deal?
Distinguished delegates, please take your seats. We are going to start now. Please take your seats.
Good morning to those of you who just came into the room, and good to see the others again after our anniversary session, the high-level meeting of the General Assembly on the 30th anniversary of the first World Conference on Women is called to order. Heads of state and government, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, distinguished participants. I warmly welcome all of you to this high-level meeting convened to mark the 30th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women and to renew our resolve to fully implement the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. This high-level meeting is held on the theme Recommitting to, Resourcing and Accelerating the Implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls, in accordance with General Assembly Resolution 79/288 of 7th May 2025. Allow me now to make a statement as President of the General Assembly.
Please take your seats, distinguished delegates.
Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights, once and for all. When these famous words were spoken by Hillary Clinton 30 years ago in Beijing, they were revolutionary. But if our daughters heard this today, wouldn't they rather think, why would women's rights not be human rights? Our daughters, who are the fastest sprinter in their high school, our daughters who are CEO of an AI startup, our daughters who have watched their mothers become the first female president of the Marshall Islands, of Namibia, North Macedonia, Peru, of Slovenia or Suriname. All presidents joining us here today. For so many of you, of us here in this room, we hold these positions that when we ourselves were young seemed unattainable, but are now almost normal for the next generation. Because we stand on the shoulders of giants, on the shoulders of women who paved the way forward also for us. Towards a world in which our daughters today regard women's rights, our human rights, as a simple fact, not as something revolutionary. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, feminist leaders, ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate the courageous women who fought for every single phrase, for every single word in the Beijing Declaration. Their fight paid off. The Beijing Declaration was a watershed achievement advancing women's rights, resources, and representation. As Mama Mongella, how she was called, stated in 1995, a revolution has begun. There's no going back. Yet, 30 years later, the revolution remains unfinished. When the phrase, "she runs like a girl," is hailed as an insult, when highly qualified CEOs are called diversity hires, when a female world leader is attacked on social media not for the speech she gave, but for the wrong high heels she wore. That is when we remember how far we still have to go. There's no country in the world where women's rights are fully equal to men. And there are still too many places where even speaking about women's rights is a matter of life and death. Just weeks ago in Afghanistan, after the deadly earthquake, women and girls were left trapped in rubble as male rescuers were forbidden from touching them. As one survivor said, being a woman here means we are always the last to be seen. We see this also in Sudan, where the brutal civil war between two generals is literally being fought over women's bodies. I still have her voice in my ear when one mother told me, while I was sitting with her in a refugee camp, that she wishes that they all would have been simply killed, instead of having to see her daughters being raped over and over again. This year alone, demand for life-saving post-rape support in Sudan increased almost 4 times. And this is no exception. 1 in 3 women globally will experience sexual violence at some point in her lifetime. 1 out of 3. This is us. And these battles extend to family planning. UNFPA estimates that today a quarter of women are unable to make decisions about their own health care, and roughly half of all pregnancies are unintended. Delivering on Beijing, on this revolution, means also that no male politician, judge or religious leader should dare to tell our girls what to do with their bodies, because they are human beings, not property. It's our body, our choice. In this regard, I'm honored we are joined by our first guest speaker, Cecilia Suarez, who is using her platform to speak out against this scourge in Latin America and the Caribbean, affecting as many as 76% of women in the region. But even in the darkest hours, women are not victims. They are survivors. They are heroes. And it's an extreme honor that we will also hear from our guest speaker, Nadia Murad, Nobel laureate, a hero who not only survived the unthinkable crimes of ISIS, but gave Yazidi women a voice and by that defeated a terrorist organization. Women like Nadia Murad remind us that women's rights are not only human rights, but human rights are the best weapon for peace. Excluding women peace builders doesn't just reduce the possibility of peace, it undermines its very foundation and longevity. Therefore, we are celebrating today not only Beijing, but also 25 years of Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Excellencies, Beijing and Resolution 1325 promised not only rights, but also resources. And there, the revolution has barely begun. At the current rate, reaching economic equality will take 123 years. But women's economic empowerment is not just about doing a favor for women, but a favor for every society, every economy. As they say, it's economics, stupid. Closing the gender gap would increase global GDP by $7 trillion. Which brings us to the third R, representation. We all know that when women are at the table, companies perform better, peace treaties last longer, and governments deliver more. Their presence is power. Yet, in this hall of principles, last year, fewer than 10% of speakers during high-level week were women. And out of all 80 presidents of the General Assembly, I'm only the 5th woman. Not even speaking about the Secretary General, where in 80 years we have never had a female SG. This is not just This is, as we can hear, not just a matter of representation, it's a matter of credibility to practice what we preach. But it's not only who is leading, it is how we lead. Leadership means collaboration. The theme of this 80th session overall is better together. A motto which also guided Beijing, where so many women came together in networks like Femnet, led by Memory Kachamba, a guest speaker here also today. Ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate this spirit of better together and the courage of the women who paved the path to Beijing and beyond. But tomorrow we go back to work. As female presidents, as male presidents, as Olympic sprinters, as CEOs, as ordinary mothers and daughters. And just in case, while finishing the revolution from Beijing, we might hear that contemptuous phrase, "you run like a girl," we should remember what little girls all around the world would do. Exactly that. Proudly run like a girl, fast as hell, even in high heels, showing that women's rights are always human rights, that they are our rights, our future. I now invite the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, to make a statement.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, dear friends. 30 years ago, the world came together to affirm that the rights of women and girls are not separate, secondary, or negotiable. They are human rights. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action is the most ambitious global political commitment on women's rights ever achieved. And it has helped to power advances in some critical areas: legal protection, political participation, education, maternal mortality, recognizing the need to tackle violence against women as a global priority, and more. But progress has been slow and uneven, and no nation has achieved full equality for women and girls. Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality, is lagging far behind. Hard-won gains are now under attack. Meanwhile, conflicts and climate disasters are multiplying, and the human rights of women and girls are casualties of both. Cultural and structural barriers remain entrenched, and technology is spreading hate like a virus. A wave of misogyny is rolling across the world. Let us be clear. Equal rights and opportunities are not partisan issues. They are global imperatives and the foundation of peace, prosperity, and progress. Excellencies, dear friends, in every region, every country, every community, women and girls are fighting for their rights, demanding freedoms, combating abusive practices, rallying for legal protections, and organizing to take their rightful place at the table in decision-making and peace processes. And the United Nations stands with them. All leaders should do the same, by speaking out for the rights of women and girls, by making clear that tradition cannot excuse oppression, and by doing everything possible to realize the vision of the Beijing Declaration. Excellencies, dear friends, earlier this year, countries took an important step forward. The Commission on the Status of Women adopted a new political declaration committing to implement the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action fast and in full. So now all countries must live up to that responsibility. We need strong, visible support at the highest levels and concrete plans backed by real investment to support women's organizations, services and solutions, to deliver the Beijing +30 action agenda, to advance socio-economic empowerment, to defend women's rights, and to confront a challenge that was barely imagined 3 decades ago. Artificial intelligence is reshaping our world, but the transformation is unfolding in an industry dominated by men, shaped by biased data, and driven by algorithms that frequently reinforce discrimination. We must confront violence and online hate and ensure that technology serves equality, not exclusion. And that includes a priority in investing in women and girls' education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Because women's participation in decision-making on this issue and every other, it is not a gift, it is a right. It strengthens societies, enriches debate, and boosts equality across the board. We must remove systematic obstacles to equality for women and girls. From discrimination to unequal pay and inequality before the law. We need universal ratification of the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women.
Excellencies, lastly, we need proactive steps to bring women into decision-making at every level. Here at the United Nations, through a dedicated effort, we have achieved and maintained gender parity among the senior leadership.
On these. Some think that we had to bend the rules in favor of women to reach parity. Totally wrong. The only thing we did was to guarantee that there was effective equality opportunities for women and men, and that the selection processes had not a misogynist bias. And the result was parity at the level of the high direction of the United Nations. Nous poursuivons nos efforts.
We will keep working to reach gender parity across the organization, and our Gender Equality Acceleration Plan charts our path forward. Your Excellencies, 80 years ago, the United Nations Charter affirmed the equal rights of women and men. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration declared women's rights as human rights. In this hall today, we need to hear how you will make those ambitions a reality. Let us hear your commitments. Let us see your plans. Let us deliver together the equality for women and girls that our world so sorely needs. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. I now invite Her Excellency Huang Shouwei, Deputy Head of the National Working Committee on Children and Women of the State Council of China, as host of the 4th World Conference on Women, to make a statement.
尊敬的
Distinguished Madam President, distinguished colleagues, China commends the General Assembly for convening this meeting to mark the 30th anniversary of the Beijing World Conference on Women. Just as what Madam President stated, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action for Women has a milestone kind of significance. It is a source of wisdom and strength, and it continues to provide a blueprint for action that continues to guide global efforts towards gender equality. Over the past 3 decades, the World Conference on Women has been a catalyst for tremendous change, from advancing legal reforms to expanding social services, from empowering women to enhancing their participation. Countries have made notable strides toward gender equality. Countless women have undergone profound transformations, moving from silence to voice, from the margins to the center, and from dependence to independence. These achievements testify to the foresight and enduring vitality of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Gender equality is not only a human right, but also a powerful driver of sustainable development. For the past 30 years, as host of the Beijing Conference on Women, China has honored its commitments through concrete action. Under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, China has steadfastly advanced gender equality as a fundamental national policy, implemented 4 successive cycles of the National Program for Women's Development, and built a comprehensive legal framework of more than 100 laws and regulations to safeguard women's rights and interests. With measurable and effective institutional mechanisms, China has significantly strengthened women's empowerment in the fields of economy, health, education, employment, political participation, and social protection, benefiting 690 million women. Chinese women, with their creativity, continue to hold up half the sky in the nation's progress. China has consistently championed the advancements of women around the world. In partnership with the United Nations, China established the Prize for Girls and Women's Education, with Professor Peng Liyuan, spouse of President Xi Jinping, serving as special envoy. China has trained more than 200,000 female professionals from over 180 countries and regions, and has carried out empowerment projects totaling over $40 million in more than 20 countries. The Global Center for Digital Empowerment of Women, established by China, offers a new platform to help bridge the digital gender divide and to promote women's meaningful participation in AI development. Distinguished Madam President, colleagues, at present, the century's profound transformation is accelerating, and the global governance stands at a critical crossroads. Nearly 10% of women remain trapped in extreme poverty. More than 600 million women lived amid conflict, and violence against women, discrimination, and economic inequality continue. Developing countries face an annual funding gap of $420 billion for gender equality. These challenges call for urgent, more proactive, and pragmatic action. Chinese President Xi Jinping's proposal for a global governance initiative comes at a critical juncture. Advancing gender equality and the full development of women requires strengthened international cooperation, accelerated action, and sustained commitments at this new starting point, China calls for the following: continued advancement of the eco-development of women. Safeguarding women's rights and interests should be elevated as a national priority and embedded as a social norm. The allocation of resources to this end should be increased to ensure women's equal access to opportunities and their full participation. Continued empowerment of women in innovation and development. Quality education for women and girls should be provided. Digital technologies should be harnessed to strengthen their capabilities, support their leadership, and unlock their innovative potential. Continue to promote the shared development of women worldwide. All countries should uphold genuine multilateralism and fully leverage the vital role of the UN, deepen South-South cooperation and North-South dialogue, and expand financial and technical support for developing countries, leaving no woman or girl behind. Distinguished Madam President, dear colleagues, gender equality is not only a matter for women, but a cornerstone of human progress and human civilization. Let us remain true to our original aspirations and mission, continue to translate the blueprint of the Beijing Declaration and platform for action into tangible results, and work together to build a community with a shared future for all. I look forward to welcoming you at the Global Summit on Women in Beijing. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Head of the National Working Committee on Children and Women of the State Council of China. I now invite Ms. Sima Bahous, Executive Director of the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, to make her statement.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, distinguished heads of state and government, Your Majesties, ministers, excellencies. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action changed the world. It brought the UN Charter's principles and promises to life for women and girls. Human rights, dignity, equality. To this day, the Beijing Declaration remains the most visionary, groundbreaking, and far-reaching global agenda for gender equality and women's rights. And it has delivered. Today, girls are far more likely to finish school than any other moment in history. Maternal deaths have nearly halved. The number of women in parliament has more than doubled, and nearly every country has laws to end violence against women and girls. And in just the last 5 years alone, nearly 100 discriminatory laws have been reversed. Every step forward was hard-won by feminist movements, by governments, by the multilateral system, and every step forward proved the same truth: gender equality works. But progress has not been fast enough, wide enough, or deep enough, and in too many places it is being reversed. On our current path, 351 million women and girls will still live in extreme poverty by 2030. And today, 676 million women and girls live within reach of deadly conflict, the highest recorded since the 1990s. Women and girls in crises suffer unspeakable atrocities, hunger and violence, from Afghanistan, the DRC, Gaza, the Sudan, Ukraine, to Yemen and beyond. Women and girls bear the brunt of crisis. We owe it to them to spare no effort in the pursuit for peace. Excellencies, the very systems built to advance and fund gender equality are being hollowed out quietly but deliberately. This is not just regression, it is retreat. But the future is not fixed. Another path is still possible. Excellencies, as we commemorate 80 years of the United Nations and 30 years since the Beijing Declaration, 2025 must be our turning point. This is why, in this pivotal year, we asked governments to recommit with bold, measurable actions across a roadmap of 6 priority areas. And you answered. 108 governments have stepped forward with 196 national actions on the Beijing +30 action agenda. You are investing in care systems, strengthening gender data, and funding women peace builders on the front lines. You are putting power, protection, and possibility in the hands of women and girls. You are harnessing technology and innovation to advance, not hinder, equality. And you are enacting laws to protect women and girls from violence. Your actions reflect partnerships with feminist movements who have carried this agenda through times of backlash and breakthrough alike. Importantly, your actions prioritize the leadership and voice of adolescent girls and women. These actions form a map of the possible, and we know what that possible can deliver when we come together. Just this past week, you took another step forward together when you adopted by consensus the resolution to revitalize the Commission on the Status of Women, a timely legacy of Beijing +30. I applaud you for this. This is multilateralism at its best. Excellencies, your words today must be matched by courage tomorrow. In the policies you pass, in the budgets you allocate, and the change you drive together with and for women. Because gender equality remains a unifying force for the world. Let history remember 2025 as the year we stood our ground for ceasefires, for peace, for justice, for equal rights, for sustainable development, and for prosperity for all women, for all girls, for all humanity. I thank you.
I thank the Executive Director of the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women. I now invite Ms. Dean Kaita, Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund, to make her statement.
Mr. Secretary General, Madam President, Excellencies, esteemed colleagues. 30 years ago, in Beijing, the world pledged to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment. 1 year earlier, at the International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, government affirmed that sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights are a precondition for women empowerment and essential to dignity and development. Population, sexual reproductive health and rights, and gender equality are inextricably linked. Beijing and Cairo go hand in hand, mutually reinforcing and universal. Today, we gather not only to commemorate, but also to thank the member states for their efforts. While significant progress has been made, it is fragile. Too many women still die giving birth. Too many women and girls are denied safety and opportunity. Millions of youth and marginalized people do not have their most basic needs met. And new threats are rising: climate change, increasing conflict, digital world where technology, including artificial intelligence, can be fabulous opportunities when used properly, instead of being weaponized against women and girls. Demographic shifts are reshaping societies. Rapid population growth in some regions, aging in others, rising migration, systems are strained, inequalities deepen, reproductive rights come under threat. Excellences, je m'adresse à vous.
Excellencies, I address you today as the new Executive Director of UNFPA. I take on this responsibility with humility and determination. I am determined to protect what has been achieved and to stand up for human rights and to go further together so that the promises made in Beijing and Cairo are finally upheld. The United Nations Population Fund is at your side, alongside the partners in the United Nations, civil society, and particularly women's organizations and networks as they continue their tireless work to promote the rights and choices of women and girls in all their diversity. UNFPA's contribution to these efforts is unique. As a public health and population agency, we work to ensure that every woman and girl can live free from violence and decide freely on her future. Sexual and reproductive health and rights are the foundation of equality in our society, the best investment in the better, fairer world envisioned in the 2030 Agenda.
Beijing and Cairo with urgent action. Under our Secretary General leadership, we look forward to delivering as one with our sister agency on the ground. Let us recommit to do better together and make sure that no woman should die while giving life. Let's invest in rights and choices, the foundation of justice, prosperity, and peace. Merci.
Merci. I thank the Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund. I now invite Ms. Hala Haidar, Chair of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, to make her statement.
Madam President of the GA, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. 30 years after Beijing, it must be said loud and clear, gender equality is not a favor. It's not optional. It is justice, peace, and progress for all humanity. Beijing gave us a powerful blueprint. It mandated the world to tackle 12 urgent areas: poverty, education, violence, decision-making, among others. And it transformed global policies. We have made gains: stronger laws against gender-based violence, more girls in schools, and a growing recognition that women's rights are human rights. But let us be honest. We are at a crossroad. Around the world, we witness a backlash against women's human rights, their underrepresentation in decision-making, online abuse, and discrimination against women being coded into new technologies. Moreover, we are horrified by the impact of conflict on women and girls. This is why CEDAW, the committee and the convention, matters more than ever. Beijing gave us the vision. CEDAW gives us the compass. The convention is legally binding. It holds states to account and measures progress and turns promises into rights that cannot be taken away. CEDAW covers every Beijing priority: defends women's economic rights, access to resources, calls for education, a force of transformation, places gender-based violence against women at the center of its concern and demands action. It advances women's voice in peace and security processes, and in that regard, CEDAW has just published an addendum on WPS. And with General Recommendation number 40 on the equal and inclusive representation of women in decision-making system, whose elaboration was supported by a large number of member states, it sets a bold roadmap for 50-50 parity in decision-making, not some distant day, but now. CEDAW is not a bystander. It's a driving force. It is addressing many emerging issues faced by women and girls in conflict, online abuse, stereotypes, and the gendered impacts of climate change. So today, let us stand together and say we will not go back. We will not allow the progress of the past 30 years to be undone. We will renew our commitments, demand accountability, and keep pushing until every woman and girl can live in freedom, equality, and dignity. Beijing gave us the blueprint. CEDAW gives us the compass. Today, as we celebrate Beijing Plus 30, I call on every government, in every institution, and every one of us. Let us turn today's momentum into a movement. Let us act united, boldly, urgently, until equality is no longer a dream, but the lived reality of every woman and girls everywhere. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the Chair of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. I now invite Ms. Claudia Flores, Chair of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls, to make a statement.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues, it is an honor to join you in my capacity as chair of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. Thank you for including the working group in this landmark discussion. As we reflect on and reaffirm the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, we have both an opportunity but also a responsibility. We celebrate the gains of the last 30 years, recognizing that these victories, above all, belong to the brave women and girls human rights defenders who have pressed forward in the face of great restraints and risk. We also acknowledge the important progress achieved by member states in partnership with diverse stakeholders. As it marks its 15th anniversary, the working group has seen meaningful strides, from laws ensuring equal participation in public life, to reforms dismantling discrimination in family and cultural life, to new investments expanding women's and girls' economic rights. These advances demonstrate what is possible when states commit systematically to equality in all of its dimensions. Yet, we must also confront the reality that alongside this progress, and perhaps in response to it, a troubling wave of backlash threatens women and girls' rights worldwide, including challenges to the very concept of gender as the social and cultural norms and power relations we have built around sex. We see retrogressive narratives and policies designed to restrict rights and divide movements for dignity and equality. These are not abstract debates. They are concrete harms with grave costs for women and girls. In our most recent response, the working group, together with 30 independent mandate holders, issued a joint statement reaffirming the centrality of gender to the protection of human rights. Today, I urge states to act with determination to preserve international consensus and protect hard-won gains for women and girls. At the same time, we also recognize that these moments of challenge can be moments of opportunity. The working group remains committed to supporting states and stakeholders in advancing substantive gender equality as articulated in CEDAW. This year, through its forthcoming report on artificial intelligence and through the CREATE framework presented in its latest guidance, this framework offers a holistic and inclusive pathway to counter the gender backlash and to foster the transformation needed for a global community truly rooted in human dignity. Excellencies, while we celebrate the achievements of member states, civil society, the United Nations, all who are gathered here, we must also confront urgently and honestly what it will take to achieve gender equality. We can't afford another 30 years of effort only to see progress unravel. What is needed now is investment and political will to hold the line, the clarity to find ways forward amidst mounting challenges, and the integrity to trust women and girls as they continue to lead the way. Thank you.
I thank the Chair of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. I now invite Ms. Reem Al-Salem, Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, its causes and consequences, to make her statement.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action, the BDPA, gave the world a visionary blueprint that recognized the structural, societal, and individual causes of violence against women and their consequences. Today, as we commemorate its anniversary, we must recommit to its promise with honesty and courage. That starts with returning to the original intent of the BDPA, not diluted, not reinterpreted, and to implementing it comprehensively and not superficially. Let me highlight 6 commitments that are especially urgent and pertinent today. First, we must reaffirm women's inherent dignity and humanity. The BDPA mentions dignity 7 times and humanity 5 times, reminding us that women are not a subset, but are half of humanity. Yet today, those words have vanished from our policy language as though women's most basic worth and rights could be set aside. If we lose the language of dignity and humanity, we lose the foundation of equality. Second, we must reclaim the material reality of being female. The BDPA references the term sex or a derivative of it 176 times, recalling that all major human rights instruments prohibit discrimination on that basis. And yet, 3 decades later, the architects of the BDPA would be in disbelief to learn that stating this truth is branded by some as hateful, outdated, and regressive. Third, we must confront the rampant commodification and objectification of women and girls. Their bodies, their sexuality, and even reproductive functions have been turned into products for the sale and purchase, creating patriarchal entitlements and control, both online and offline. The BDPA was gravely and rightly concerned with this exploitation, particularly of prostitution and trafficking for sexual exploitation, and urged states to prosecute those who profit from it. Today, we must finally heed that call. Fourth, the BDPA identified aggression, colonialism, and foreign occupation as causes of grave violations, ethnic cleansing, genocide that fall within cruelty on women and girls. While governments stand idly by, women and girls, particularly in Palestine and in Afghanistan, are being intentionally and systematically targeted and destroyed. These atrocities and the impunity granted to their perpetrators expose the profound hypocrisy of governments who claim to defend women's rights while turning a blind eye to their annihilation. Fifth, the BDPA demanded accountability. But instead of an increased access to justice, we are seeing the opposite, on several fronts undermining rights hard-won. Perpetrators of rape, trafficking, war crimes, and genocide walk free, flaunting their impunity while some governments boast of their support to them. And finally, the BDPA warned against excessive military spending, recognizing that militarization fuels violence against women while draining resources from peace, women empowerment, and ending violence, as well as social justice. Yet today, the global arms race intensifies, leaving women and girls to pay a hefty price. Excellencies, 30 years ago, states believed this agenda was achievable. If this was possible then, it is possible now, not as an act of charity, but as a necessity and undeniable right for women, for half of humanity. That half is watching, and that half will hold you to account. Thank you.
I thank the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, its causes and consequences. I now invite Cecilia Suarez, UN Global Advocate for the Spotlight Initiative, to make her statement.
Good morning. Madam President, Secretary General, Excelencias, amigos, nos reunimos como...
Excellencies, friends, we meet this month as every year to take a look at the world that we live, a complex world without a doubt, among multiple armed conflicts, a full-scale genocide, and an increasingly severe climate crisis, and an unstoppable advance of technology without a clear legal framework or a transparent one. And as each September, we return to a topic that brings us together, the equality of that women and girls continue to demand throughout our planet. Today, with radical urgency, it shows that a policy of omission would mean for millions of women and girls in every part of the world a step backwards. It's not a surprise for anyone that global investment in gender equality is inadequate as a small part of global budgets. The numbers demonstrated. Just in 2025, the combat for gender equality shows a budgetary deficit of $420 billion. In contrast, the global investment in military expenditures is $2.7 trillion. $2.718 trillion that invested in war compared to over 400 billion deficit in gender equality. In other words, the world prefers to invest 6 times more in preparing for a conflict rather than investing in upholding and promoting the rights of half of the population. This is how the economies are built. So the obvious question is, what have we more normalized that turns out that promoting the means of war is more important than promoting the rights of women? How long we will continue to think that we will be allowed to live as second-class citizens? It might be a naive question. War is a business, of course. But it's also important to invest in what is maintaining half of the world population far from achieving their full potential within our societies, and in turn restricting the growth of society as a whole. And we will repeat it again. This gap must be understood as something that oppresses and afflicts only women. But that is a mistake. Let's ask ourselves, what does a man truly lose when he is indoctrinated in the apparent privilege granted to him by his masculinity? What we see is that what is missing is doubt, fragility, truth, the ability to feel. I can also mention that 90% of organizations working in favor of women have seen very harsh budgetary cutbacks. The situation is critical. So I will be very concrete. What we need are resources, reforms, and leadership. The Spotlight Initiative has demonstrated with its mechanisms, programs, and legal frameworks that it is possible to obtain positive and concrete results in this fight. What is required is leadership from those who are gathered here. Leadership that fosters reforms and that with facts makes it possible to truly invest in the fight for equality, with actions rather. And lastly, to those who are skeptical, I will ask, do you really believe that our passage, our presence in this world is truly worth investing in destruction instead of investing in efforts that make us all progress together? Thank you.
I thank Ms. Suarez, and now I invite Ms. Memorio Kanshamba, Executive Director of the African Women's Development and Communication Network, to make a statement.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, thank you for this opportunity to speak at this occasion. I stand before you not as a one voice, but many that carry the breath of African women and girls from the mountains of Kilimanjaro to the shores of Dakar, the streets of Harare, and the villages of Mali. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration, lit a flame. Women and girls danced. We sang together. The moment was not only symbolic, it was sacred. It was a covenant. And yes, there has been progress in the areas that Your Excellencies eloquently discussed and share on care work, gender-responsive budgeting, on women, peace and security, on the girl child, and climate justice. But let us be honest, even though this has entered the discourse has not delivered. There's been persistent and deliberate gaps, particularly the chronic underfunding of national gender institutions and the many sectors that shape our lives: health, education, agriculture, livelihoods, as well as public service provision. We have seen the erosion of women's organizing and feminist movements. We have seen reversals of hard-won gains and rights undermining our demands and struggle. We African women and girls demand bold, transparent, and participatory accountability. We insist on inclusion of women and girls in all their diversity. Civil society is not the enemy of the state. We are co-creators of development. We are guardians of democracy. We are the architects of liberation. The backlash that we face is not just against gender equality. It's against the truth. It is against freedom. It's against the principles upon which these institutions celebrating 80 years has been founded. We must affirm feminist principles that offer real alternatives to the broken system. Ubuntu, our shared humanity and interdependence, reparative justice for colonialization, debt, and climate harm. Africa each year loses close to 60 billion through illicit financial flows. These are funds and resources that can make a huge impact on women's rights and gender equality. Your Excellency, we also face a lot on our peace as a continent, on the dignity, on the extraction that we see of critical resources in the name of advancing climate transition. We see systematic violence. 80 years of the United Nations, we must not still be debating the relevance of gender equality and women's rights. Not in this generation, not after 30 years of Beijing, not after decades of the struggle. Women and girls deserve a life free of violence, free from the misogyny, free from the technology-facilitated violence that we see. Women and girls deserve to live and to thrive in dignity and joy. UNGA 80 must rise to this moment of reckoning and make bold, unapologetic resolve to fund gender equality and women's rights. It is non-negotiable. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Kachamba. I now invite Ms. Nadia Murad, Nobel Peace Laureate and founder of Nadia's Initiative, to make her statement.
Thank you, Madam President, for your commitment to advancing the rights of women and girls globally. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 30 years ago in Beijing, the world declared that women's rights are human rights. Today we gather not only to reflect on that promise, but to ask, are we truly fulfilling it? Progress has been made, more women in parliaments, in classrooms, in leadership. But we're also at a dangerous crossroads. Around the world, democracy is weakening, extremism is rising, and women's rights are under attack. Nowhere is this more visible than in conflict-affected and crisis-affected areas. Millions of women and girls denied the right to education, targeted with sexual violence, or forced into early marriage. Behind these injustices are human lives, mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends, families destroyed, futures stolen. I was once a young woman living in peace until ISIS captured me and countless other women and girls, shattering our lives in unimaginable ways. Hundreds of these women and girls, including my niece, my sister-in-law, and my cousins, are still missing in captivity in Syria. Since my escape, I have met many women who endured unimaginable suffering and whose strength is extraordinary. But strength alone cannot rebuild lives. They need action, they need justice, they need resources. And yet, women's organizations, the lifeline in times of crisis, remain underfunded and excluded. Perpetrators of sexual violence continue to enjoy impunity. Equally urgent, the international community must hold accountable regimes, groups, and governments that deny women and girls the rights, those that legalize child marriage, restrict education, or enact discriminatory laws. Justice must extend beyond individuals to the system and structures that perpetuate inequality. If we are serious about the Beijing Platform for Action, then we must do three things. Fund the women's organizations on the front lines, guarantee women's full participation in peace and security, hold perpetrators and oppressive systems accountable, because impunity should never be an option. These are not just policies, they are promises we owe it to every woman and girl. Sustainable peace is impossible while half of humanity's population is silenced or targeted with violence. 30 years after Beijing, reflection is not enough. We must accelerate. The next generation of women and girls deserve to inherit no more promises, but the reality of equality, justice, and dignity. Thank you.
I thank Nadia Murad, and with the wise words from her, we have just heard the last speaker for the opening segment of this high-level meeting. I thank all our eminent speakers once again for their participation and insightful interventions, and maybe we have applause for all of the speakers again. Heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, distinguished delegates, distinguished participants. We shall now hear statements in the plenary segment in accordance with paragraphs 1 and 3b of General Resolution 79/288. Before giving the floor to the first speaker, I would like to inform delegations that we have a very, very, very long list of inscriptions, which shows the commitments But in order to enable the high-level meeting to hear from as many delegations as possible in the limited time, all speakers are requested to adhere to the 3-minute time limit for statements in the national capacity and 5 minutes for statements made on behalf of a group of states. Delegations are advised that the limit for time statement will be strictly enforced, and I would like to underline that. The microphones will be automatically muted once the speaking time has elapsed. Having said this, I would appeal to all speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to facilitate interpretation into the 6 official languages of the United Nations, and have always a look at the little clock in front of you. Having said that, it's my dear honor to give now the floor to our first speaker of the high-level meeting convened by the President of the General Assembly on the 30th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women. And I give the floor to Her Excellency Jennifer Gerling-Simons, President of the Republic of Suriname.
Excellencies, it is with great honor and responsibility that I stand here as the first female president of the Republic of Suriname and also the first member state speaking today as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women. This historic occurrence in my country has not only cracked the glass ceiling, but more importantly paved the way for particularly girls to dream about something that was perceived uncommon only about 3 decades ago. Today, we celebrate the work and advocacy of many pioneers at both political and intergovernmental levels in bringing the cause of women's empowerment and gender equality to the center of the global agenda. Madam President, as I pause to reflect of the role of women in Suriname, I can conclude that women of my country historically have always been on the forefront in the fight for freedom, justice, and economic development. Suriname remains committed to the Beijing Declaration and has made gradual progress in strengthening legislation, advancing gender-sensitive policies, and implementing programs to address persistent inequalities. Persistent challenges such as economic disparities, gender-based violence, and underrepresentation of women in leadership. These must be addressed with renewed urgency and vigor. We also face new and have to address new challenges, like the negative influence of social media on the self-image of many girls and young women. In closing, Madam President, Suriname reaffirms its unwavering commitment to advancing the rights, empowerment, and full participation of women and girls in every aspect of life. As a priority action, my government commits to further improve access to STEM education for girls and the protection of women and girls against gender-based violence. Advancing gender equality means progress in achieving sustainable development for all. Working as equals, living as equals, as women and men, we are better together. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, and again, congratulations for being the first of your kind, the first female president of Suriname. Congratulations. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Karen Keller-Sutter, President of the Swiss Confederation.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action remains our collective compass to achieve gender equality, because gender equality is not an option. It is a universal human right and a catalyst for economic development. Despite the progress made, we still face serious challenges, including in Switzerland. First and foremost, violence against women remains an unacceptable reality. The wage gap persists, largely because working mothers are not fully integrated into the labor market, and because women are still underrepresented in leadership roles. 30 years after Beijing, our goals remain unchanged. Switzerland has taken concrete steps to implement the rights enshrined in our Constitution and in our international commitments. Our national strategy for gender equality, adopted in 2021, as well as major legislative reforms, have improved the protection of victims of gender-based violence, including expanding the legal definition of rape and criminalizing stalking. And this November, we will be launching a nationwide campaign against gender-based violence with a clear message that equality protects against violence. In our foreign policy, Switzerland is deeply committed to promoting universality of women's rights and gender equality, with a particular focus on women's economic and political participation and the fight against gender-based violence. Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, recent crises have set back the cause of gender equality. The progress we have achieved over the past few decades are now at risk in too many countries, but solutions have been formulated a long time ago, and they've been set out in various multilateral frameworks. Today, we need to build on that foundation and commit to putting it into practice. This is the surest path to protecting people and building societies that are truly equal and inclusive. Democracy and economic prosperity depend on it. Together, let us make the vision of Beijing a reality. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. I give the floor now to Her Excellency Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, President of the Republic of Namibia.
Madam President, gender equality and women empowerment have been key priorities for Namibia's government since our independence in 1990. We have shown strong political will through adopting international commitments, including the Beijing Declaration and the Platform of Action, which are domesticated in our national gender policy. 30 years ago in Beijing, we affirmed that women's rights were indeed human rights. Since then, Namibia has always built on the strong foundation of this declaration to draw a strong link on issues related to women and development and access. Our progress in the area of political inclusion and legal frame are grounded in this and underpinned our deep commitment to achieve progress for empowerment of women. As a result of this, Namibia closed 81.1% of its gender gap, ranking 8th globally and first in Africa as per the 2025 World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap reports. As President, I'm happy to highlight our historical milestone. Namibia now has a female president, vice president, speaker of the National Assembly, and secretary general of the SWAPO party, the ruling party in Namibia. And women women hold 57% of the cabinet, including key ministries such as finance, health, education, international relations and trade. Madam President, as we reflect on our progress, we are also aware that our work is far from to be done. There are areas where there is room for improvement, particularly in the area of economics. In our national context, this is mainly in the area of economic inclusion of women in many economic activities such as mining, fishery, oil and gas, particularly rural women who still remain in the margin of the economic activities. Economic challenge persists across the many sectors, so much that we have to do a lot, particularly in the informal sector, to bring women to the par.
Madam President, thank you. I thank you very much, Madam President. And also congratulations to Namibia. And just in case you hear again, we couldn't find a woman, call the government or the president of Namibia. They could advise you. So the next on the list, I have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Dina Ercilia Boluarte Segarra, President of the Republic of Peru.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Madam President. 30 years have passed since we adopted the Declaration and Platform of Action of Beijing, a historic landmark that marked the most significant political commitment to achieve the empowerment of all women, adolescents and girls, and the full exercise of their human rights under conditions of equality. Since then, we have achieved some significant results. We have reduced the gap in access to education and the labour market. A growing number of women is getting access to decision-making fora, and we have strengthened norms in fighting violence and discrimination against women. Nevertheless, President, there are still structural gaps that are limiting the development of women and girls. Extreme poverty and multidimensional poverty, discrimination and violence continue to disproportionately affect us as women. And Peru is taking decisive action. In 2019, we approved our national gender equality policy. Its key objectives are to guarantee women the exercise of all of their rights, the eradication of violence against women, the empowerment of women so that we can overcome the institutional and socio-cultural barriers that women face. We have more than 400 emergency women's centres across the country, and they have an intercultural approach to deal with cases of violence against women so that we can put an end to this scourge. And we are using public funds to finance projects to support the economic independence of women. We have also taken steps to legally recognise the right to care and to create a national care system to guarantee this right. We're also accrediting and certifying the skills of care workers, many of whom are women. We are working to guarantee women's access to quality education and also working to promote greater inclusion in the labour market and increasing women's participation at the political level and all levels of government. And I'm very proud to let you know that in 2023 we abolished child marriage. Madam President, as the first woman president, the interpreter apologizes, the microphone does not appear to be working.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Madam President. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias and
thank you very much.
Congratulations for being the first female president, and may I remind all speakers and maybe also all delegation to look at the script again. I'm very sorry for that one, but we have so many presidents and prime ministers speaking in a row. The next I may introduce is Her Excellency Nataša Pirc-Musar, President of the Republic of Slovenia.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, we need to face a difficult truth. Progress on gender equity has been uneven, and many of our hard-won gains are now at risk. Sexual and gender-based violence, economic inequality, a lack of sexual and reproductive rights, political underrepresentation, and the systemic discrimination of women persist. Real change requires making gender equity a genuine priority, including in peace and security. If not now, when? At a time when the world is facing a record number of conflicts. Conflicts that claim a devastating number of civilian lives, as in Gaza, where 2/3 of the victims are women and children. Simply put, the inclusion of women is a guarantee for peace. It is also high time that the UN's leadership reflects the diversity of the people it serves. This calls for bold action from all of us to nominate, support, and elect women to the highest offices, both here at the UN and in our own countries as well. After 80 years, the United Nations must lead by example. We cannot afford to miss yet another chance to appoint the first woman Secretary General, nor we can afford to move forward into a future where still only 6% of General Assembly presidents are women. Let me be clear. The issue has never been about merit. There are plenty smart and capable women. What is lacking is the will to open doors. Dear all, let us invest in women's leadership and ensure that every girl can live a life of opportunity. I know that women and girls in Afghanistan, Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, Haiti, and beyond are counting on us. And let me just conclude. My husband is a proud feminist. I am a proud feminist. And I am battling this battle not to say that the men need less. I'm not doing this for that. I just want the girls to have the same opportunities. And we need men to help us. And just to conclude with a couple of numbers, do you know how many presidents we have, female presidents we have in European Union? 2, in Malta and in Slovenia. Do you know how many presidents we have here in United Nations out of 193 members? 16. Those are the numbers. Thank you. And
I thank Her Excellency, Madam President, and again also congratulations to you being the first in that role. I give the floor now to His Excellency Daniel Francesco Chapo, President of the Republic of Mozambique.
Senhora Presidente.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, before my intervention, I would like to say that I am here in order to save the honor of men in the room, because since we've started, I just see women making the intervention.
Daí que há necessidade.
For that reason, I would like to say that we need to have men talking about this topic too. It's an honor to address this distinguished assembly in a year. We celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action. On this occasion, I would like to reaffirm the unwavering commitment to the women empowerment of Mozambique. This is why the implementation of the agenda of Beijing, we have defined 2 priority areas for all girls and women, namely freedom of poverty through promoting access to reproductive resources and economic resources, zero violence, with a particular focus on eradication of femicide and all forms of gender-based violence. Your Excellencies, since Beijing, we have achieved gender parity in the Council of Ministers and in the Parliament. Almost 50% of the girls in the country are enrolled in all the levels of education. We have increased the number of institutional births from 48% to 65%. We have women in leadership position in the central organ of sovereignty, like the Prime Minister, the President of the Assembly of the Republic, the President of Constitutional Council, President of Administrative Courts, amongst other significant advances achieved in the local leadership. We have also created around 30 integrated centers to fight gender-based violence. We still face a lot of challenges. 44% of the girls are in early unions, 68% were victims of violence, and 27% of girls are still unemployed. Mindful of new frontiers of inequalities that are emerging with artificial intelligence and digital technologies that affect disproportionately the employment of women, Mozambique is integrating into the curriculum and promoting girls' access to science and technology,
Thank you, Mr. President. Obrigado, and I thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Mozambique. I give the floor now to Her Excellency Hilda Hein, President of the Republic of Marshall Islands.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, Yahweh. 30 years ago, Ambassador Nay John Edwards, now happily retired, led a delegation of Marshallese women to the Beijing Conference of Women. That conference changed her life and generations of Marshallese women ever since. Since the Beijing Declaration, gender is now a core pillar of our national planning. As a small island developing state, we are not moving fast enough with island-tailored strategies. In a nation where our 1 out of 2 women experience violence, and in the Pacific Island region with the lowest rate of women in elected government in the world. Core efforts need to be strengthened, including in our families and communities. We can build on our traditional matrilineal customs to encourage the role of women as peace builders, as human rights defenders, and contemporary leaders in their fields. While the Marshall Islands has instituted important legal reforms, rates of gender-based violence remain unacceptably high. Education, police officer training, and crisis services have been key steps. We will continue to ensure the full recognition and realization of human rights for women and girls, including through our recent ratification of the Palermo Protocol on Trafficking. The health of women and girls is a key priority and is written in our survival story, where the nuclear legacy has left behind cancers, reproductive health struggles, and the unseen weight of caregiving. We answer this with urgency, expanding maternal care and family planning, and launching mass cervical cancer screening and prevention so that every woman and girls has the chance to live and to lead. Women's economic empowerment is vital to achieving equality. Through the Marshall Islands CAREF Fund, a national financing initiative that supports women's entrepreneurship and access to capital, we are opening pathways to women to drive innovation, recognizing when women prosper, nation prosper. Our national early childhood development framework has forged key progress in direct interventions to provide assistance, nutrition, and care for vulnerable communities, including expectant mothers and mothers of young children. This will be expanded for universal coverage to address crisis levels of malnutrition and stunting. We welcome the region's new policy launch to incorporate climate and resilience in the framework. Madam
I thank you, Madam President. I now have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Gordana Siljanovska-Davkova, President of the Republic of North Macedonia.
Distinguished Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 30 years ago in Beijing, the nations of the world made a solemn pledge to advance women's rights and human rights, to achieve gender equality, and to empower every woman and girl to live free from violence, discrimination, and limitation. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action remain a cornerstone of international law, a living testament that equally for women is both justice and a prerequisite for peace, prosperity, and sustainable development. And yet, 3 decades on, we must admit progress has been uneven, fragile, and too often reversible. Violence against women persists with impunity, femicide desecrates the sanctity of life, and structural barriers still deny women leadership, resources, and decision-making power. These are not abstractions. They would wound families, societies, and generations. At the same time, the very institution created to safeguard peace, the United Nations faces a profound crisis. Conceived as the greatest peace project of humankind, it is now stands against a backdrop of wars raging across continents. 80 years after its founding, peace, the raison d'etre of the UN, remain elusive. Mars still rules when it is time for Venus, embodied in the vision, compassion, and leadership of women, to guide our common future. If we are serious about peace, then the time has come to entrust the helm of the United Nations to a woman. We, The women of the world, together with the children, are the first and greatest victims of war. But we are also the bearers of healing, compassion, and hope. Gender equality is not a feminist privilege. It is a humanist imperative. We do not ask for favors, not for matriarchy, but for a just order in which the talents and creativity of half of humanity are fully recognized for the advancement of politics, science, health, education, and peace. Excellencies, the Beijing Declaration called on us to ensure equal rights and equal access for women and men, girls and boys. That call remains urgent today. Only together, women and men, do we embody the full renew our commitment.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you. I thank you, Madam President. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Berjam Begay, President of the Republic of Albania.
Madam President, Excellencies, it's my pleasure to present at the commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Conference an important platform in the global efforts for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Today serves as an opportunity to renew our collective commitment and to give fresh impetus to the full implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. We have made significant strides in ensuring women's participation in political, economic, and social life. Yet, with only 5 years left to achieve SDGs, progress on gender equality is stagnating and in some areas is regressing. We must reverse this trend. This meeting must serve as a turning point, moving beyond rhetoric to action. We must mobilize adequate financial resources, reinforce accountability frameworks, and invest in measurable and transformative actions. Albania is ready to share its experience. Over the past decade, we have undertaken substantial legal, institutional, and societal reforms aimed at promoting gender equality. Albania has closed the gender gap in education, strengthened women's economic participation, and invested in digital inclusion and entrepreneurship for women and girls. These reforms have been shaped in consultation with civil society and the youth, making gender equality an important aspect of our society. To us, gender equality is essential to sustainable development, social cohesion, and shared prosperity. Albania has pledged two priorities under the Beijing Plus 30 Action Agenda. First, to intensify efforts to eliminate violence against women, and second, to expand the application of gender-responsible budgeting. At a time when conflicts and crises are multiplying, the world needs the leadership and contribution of women more than ever. Their role is fundamental in building peace, preventing conflict, and creating more inclusive and resilient societies. Albania reaffirmed its full commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, to the 2030 Agenda, and to international human rights instruments. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency President of the Republic of Albania. I have the honor to give the floor to His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen,
in all of your capacities. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action set out an ambitious roadmap to achieve gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. Today, as we mark this anniversary, we need to demonstrate clear-sightedness, determination, and a renewed commitment. Despite significant progress that has been achieved over recent decades, we see today alarming setbacks in women's rights. There are armed conflicts, the climate crises, and regressive movements which imperil our basic rights. Security Council Resolution 1325 was adopted 25 years ago. It is a key landmark. When women participate in peace processes and are present at the negotiating table, the agreements that are the fruit of these negotiations are more inclusive, and peace is more likely to be attained and to be lasting. As part of our commitment to human rights and the dignity of every person, Monaco has always supported international efforts for advancing gender equality. Both on our soil and through international cooperation, the Principality has been working proactively to promote girls' access to education, women's economic empowerment and independence, as well as the fight against all forms of violence, including in conflict and crisis contexts. The Madagascar Committee for the Protection and Promotion of Women's Rights was established in 2018. Today, this is the cornerstone for mobilization and awareness at the national level. The government of our Principality is working closely with UN agencies such as UN Women and its Sport for Generation Equality framework, which recognizes the role of sports as key leverage towards social transformation. Monaco is proud of supporting this initiative. We believe that sports should be an engine for empowerment, for respect, and for solidarity. UNICEF and UNFPA are also key partners for our action through tangible projects. So these partnerships help to anchor the principles of the Beijing Declaration in actions on the ground. I also wish to highlight the key role of civil society, women leaders, young people, and male allies in building a world that is more just, with greater solidarity and greater equality. Our Principality reaffirms our commitment to continue along this path in a decisive way alongside all of those who work day by day to ensure that this equality becomes a reality. Thank you.
I thank His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco, Sovereign Prince of the Principality of Monaco. And I have the honor now to give the floor to His Excellency Assali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros.
Madame la Présidente de l'Assemblée.
Madam President of the General Assembly, honourable guests, ladies and gentlemen, Salam alaikum. It is a great honour and a real pleasure for me to take the floor on this solemn occasion of the 30th anniversary of the World Conference on Women. This anniversary is a time for us to take stock of the progress that has been made since the historic Beijing Conference in 1995, but also to highlight the achievements and best practices as well as the continuing challenges when it comes to promoting gender equality around the world. As we are faithful to our international and regional commitments, the Comoros has ratified a number of legal instruments that are relevant to the promotion and protection of women's rights, notably the prevention of all forms of discrimination against women. During the presidency of the Comoros of the African Union, we were proud to hold up the torch of this important cause, and on the 30th of October 2023, our country organized the third conference of consultation of women African leaders on the topic stimulating commitment towards the economic empowerment of women and putting an end to violence against women and girls. Nationally, we have always guaranteed women's rights by protecting them against violence, exploitation, and any form of violence. We have adopted a number of legislative instruments nationally, including the new penal code that makes provisions for the protection of women and children. And more recently, in 2024, we created a ministry dedicated to the promotion of gender equality and training and there is a woman heading that up. We have also established a national policy for gender equality, and we have developed mechanisms for medical, legal, and other support for victims of gender-based violence. And we also offer special support for women and girls who have been victims. The network of women African leaders is actively involved with local authorities. I have placed the promotion of women at the heart of our priorities, and today women hold positions of responsibility both within the government, the parliament, legal and judicial institutions, and other areas. The interpreter apologizes, the speaker's microphone has been cut off.
Excellency, Excellency, kindly conclude your statement. I thank His Excellency, the President of the Union of Comoros, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye, President of the Republic of Senegal.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam President and General Assembly, members of the General Assembly, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank the President of the General Assembly and the Secretariat and the Secretary General for the invitation extended to participate in this meeting. We wish to recall the following. Pursuant to a call for action and mobilization for resources in order to accelerate progress towards full gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. The Beijing Program of Action has been a turning point when it comes to awareness about the obligation to have greater justice vis-a-vis all women. Progress has been achieved. However, this progress should be assessed on a regular basis in order to identify weaknesses, as well as to make the necessary adjustments to build a fair and more inclusive society. The commitment to promotion of gender equality and the rights of women means that there is a need to fight against poverty, to guarantee women's access to economic resources, to education, to health care, as well as to enhance women's participation in decision-making bodies, as well as to protect them against all forms of violence and discrimination. This is what we have been doing in Senegal through our public policies and through the Senegal 2050 vision, which places women and young people at the very heart of national citizenship and stability. We have been implementing a progress accelerator to surmount the persistent obstacles to equality with programs which include expanding access for women and girls to education and training and combating unstintingly all gender-based violence. We are fighting against all forms of violence and discrimination against women and girls. And this struggle needs to be continued with vigor in neither in religion, history, or any affiliation, or any argument can be made for women to be abused, discriminated against, or marginalized. All public bodies, members of civil society, religious and faith traditional leaders, all citizens have an obligation, more than ever before, to mobilize ourselves against brutality, against harassment, against rape, and against all forms of abuse. Together, let us surmount the persistent inequality. Let us work towards a greater partnership among states. Let us prepare future generations, succeeding generations, helping them to live in a fair, more equal, and more harmonious world. This is a shared responsibility. This is a universal moral duty. I thank you for your attention.
I thank His Excellency the President of Senegal, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadéra, President of the Central African
Well, I want to thank you very much, Lee. You've been there from the beginning with us, Lee, and we appreciate it. Nobody can sing that song like Lee Greenwood. Thank you very much, Lee, very much for being here. And his voice has not changed, you know? Pretty amazing. And a special thank you to Erica, because today, America is a nation in grief, a nation in shock, and a nation in mourning. Less than 2 weeks ago, our country was robbed of one of the brightest lights of our times, a giant of his generation, and above all, a devoted husband, father, son, Christian, and patriot. Charles James Kirk was heinously murdered by a radicalized, cold-blooded monster for speaking the truth that was in his heart. He was violently killed because he spoke for freedom and justice, for God, country, for reason, and for common sense. He was assassinated because he lived bravely, he led boldly, and he argued brilliantly without apology. He did what was right for our nation. And so on that terrible day, September 10th, 2025, our greatest evangelist for American liberty became immortal. He's a martyr now for American freedom. I know I speak for everyone here today when I say that none of us will ever forget Charlie Kirk, and neither now will history. Because while Charlie has been reunited with his Creator in heaven, his voice on earth will echo through the generations, and his name will live forever in the eternal chronicle of America's greatest patriots. He will live forever. To Charlie's incredible and beautiful widow, Erica, we know the weight of this monumental loss is almost unbearable. But even in the midst of heartache and pain too great to even fathom, you have somehow found the strength and deep faith to be a comfort to millions and millions of people. And thank you very much, Erica. Thank you very much. Today, an entire nation wraps its loving arms around you and your beautiful children. We share in your immense and overwhelming sorrow, and we vow that we will do everything we can to ensure that your children grow up in a land where their father is honored and revered as a great American hero. That's what he is. To Charlie's parents who lost their beloved son, and to the entire Kirk family, we know that no words can ever be enough to fill the void he leaves behind. That's a void that just can't be filled. But I hope the extraordinary outpouring of emotion over these past 11 days has comforted you with the knowledge that your son brought more good and love into this world in his 31 short years than most people, even very, very successful people, can bring in a lifetime. Charlie Kirk loved America with everything he had, and as we can see so clearly today, America loved Charlie Kirk. And he could always draw a big crowd. Look at this today. Look at what's gone on. This is a big crowd. Here today we have the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. We have the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Mike Johnson. We have countless members of the United States Senate, and I'm sorry I'm not going to introduce you, but I'll be up here. They're all over the place. And likewise, the House of Representatives, they're all over this big stadium. This is not an arena, this is a stadium. Our great cabinet and this stadium packed with rafters of people, not to mention the one across the street that also has tens of thousands of people, and they're watching us on screen right now. And I'm sorry we couldn't get you in. If anybody would like to give up your seat, please walk across the street. But this is like an old-time revival, isn't it? An old-time revival. For millions of Americans, especially young people, it is agonizing and unthinkable to say goodbye to a patriot whose heart still had so much to give. It's so much. Raised in the suburbs of Chicago, Charlie was filled with a patriotic spirit from his youth, and he was an all-American in everything he did. And one of the last things he said to me is, "Please, sir, save Chicago." We're going to do that. We're going to save Chicago from horrible crime. In high school, he was the quarterback of the football team and the captain of the basketball team. He was a good athlete. A lot of people don't know that about Charlie. He was an Eagle Scout who spent his school lunch breaks listening to another champion for liberty, somebody that he greatly admired, Rush Limbaugh. But what was even more important to Charlie than politics and service was the choice he made in the 5th grade, which he called the most important decision of his life, to become a Christian and a follower of his Savior, Jesus Christ. Inspired by faith and his love of freedom, Charlie did something remarkable when he was just 18 years old. On the advice of a mentor who told him to put off going to college because he was doing so well, he devoted his life to converting young people to the conservative cause. How did he do? Take a look. How did he do? In 2012, 2 days after graduating high school, and with just $1,800 in his pocket, the young man from Illinois, who no one had ever heard of, started an organization whose grand ambitions were captured in its name, Turning Point USA. Great name. And I have a feeling it's going to be bigger and better than ever before. Does that make sense? It's going to be bigger and better than ever before. Look at what's happening. 12 years ago, Charlie walked onto his first college campus, the very liberal University of Wisconsin at Madison. He set up a card table and put up a sign with 3 words, "Big government sucks." Can you believe that? That's Charlie. That day, Charlie talked to every student who approached him, most of whom were probably quite a bit older than he was. Finally, after many hours, he found the first ever Turning Point chapter leader. His first year out of high school, Charlie traveled 300 days raising money and taking his message to campuses all over the country. He lived out of his parents' basement, and they actually loved having him there. They loved Charlie. Everybody loved Charlie. And on the couches of friends and supporters, he lived off couches for 2 years, 3 years, then life started getting a little bit different. But he was always the same. For 5 years, he refused to take a paycheck, but day after day, he worked from 5 a.m. in the morning till 11 p.m. in the evening, always. His staff remembers that he wore Walmart jeans and T-shirts from the Goodwill store. Remember the Goodwill store? It wasn't easy, but Charlie wasn't in it for money at all, never has been. Money was never his thing. He was always in it for the mission. As he liked to say even back then, we have a country to save. Just what he did. He'd call me all the time, sir, we have a country to save. I said, Charlie, thanks very much for telling me that. I appreciate it. Charlie volunteered for my 2016 campaign and traveled the nation with my son, Don and Eric. I got to know him very well and saw immediately that Charlie was actually a master builder of people. It was Charlie who first started organizing young black conservatives hungry for support and leadership. It was Charlie who stood up for persecuted Christians and Jews on college campuses. It was Charlie who helped bring online censorship, free speech, and cancel culture to the fore of our political debate. He was right up there with me. It was Charlie who helped unite MAGA, and you know what M-A-H-A is? That's right, Make America Healthy Again. And tomorrow we're going to have one of the biggest announcements, really medically, I think, in the history of our country. We're going to be doing it with Bobby and Oz and all of the professionals. I think you're going to find it to be amazing. I think we found an answer to autism. How about that? Autism. Tomorrow we're going to be talking in the Oval Office in the White House about autism, how it happens, so we won't let it happen anymore, and how to get at least somewhat better when you have it, so that parents can help their child, their beautiful child. That's a big one. I've been bugging everybody over there, get the answer to that. You know, 20 years ago, 1 in 10,000 were born with autism. 20 years ago. The most recent survey says 1 in 12. How bad is that? That's for young boys, baby boys, but also girls, a little bit better. It's about 1 in 20. But we can't, because obviously there was something really wrong, and we think we know what that is. It's going to be, I think it's going to be one of the most important news conferences I'll ever have, and I look so forward to it. And you know who else looked forward to it? Because he knew. I'd tell him a little bit about what was going on. Was Charlie. He would have been front row center, believe me. We'll be missing him tomorrow. It was such a big deal for him, too. He brought together Donald Trump, Bobby Kennedy, right here in the great state of Arizona 1 year ago. Remember that? What a night, what a day that was. And it was Charlie who was among the first to speak to me about a man from Ohio by the name of J.D. Vance. Have you ever heard of him? He's doing a good job. But Charlie would often call me, sometimes the night before a big event, the other side of the country. And he'd ask me, he'd say, do you think you could come and speak at the event? The following day, right? I'd say, Charlie, give me a break. I'm the President of the United States. You want me to travel 4 hours by plane? And you know, sometimes I did it. He was a very good guy. He was a very convincing guy. He didn't stop, but he would ask for things like that. Sir, could you be tomorrow in California? I said, Charlie, give me a break, please. He just wouldn't stop. And he succeeded. But I almost always went because you never wanted to let Charlie down. He worked so hard, you just didn't want to let him down. I felt guilty. He'd make me feel very guilty. As president, many people asked me for things, but Charlie was one of the few who always gave more than he took. He was a giver much more than a taker. And no matter how big Charlie became, no one was too small for him to notice. He was good to everybody. Didn't matter. Several years ago, a fourth grader asked Charlie to appear on his podcast, which was probably only watched by the parents of that fourth grader. And Charlie, who was actually pretty hot at the time, to be honest, he agreed, and the boy asked for advice. Charlie replied, the left, I call it the radical left. I call it sometimes the radical left lunatics. But Charlie didn't say that, he called it the left. He was probably right, but I can't help it. I can't help it. So he said the left, radical left lunatics, may have all the money in the world, but they can never outwork me. I will wake up as early as I need to about himself. I will stay up as late as I need to, and I will never stop fighting for our country. And he did this until his dying breath. That's what he was doing. That's what he was doing. Think of it. Wow. What a horrible moment. I was in the Oval Office when I heard they came in, and it was like a surreal experience, a terrible, terrible. I had some very big people in the Oval Office, and I was in the midst of a very important conversation for our country, big people, the biggest. And I said, you have to leave now. When they told me that, they told me in front of a group of very powerful people, I said, you have to leave now, right now, please. Right now, you have to leave, go. By his own determination and skill, Charlie Kirk built Turning Point from his humble beginnings, the beginnings that nobody believed could ever end up something like this, into a great movement and a juggernaut of American politics. And you know, we have a massive stadium loaded up with people, but he got tremendous crowds before he had this kind of horrible news and before we had to hear what happened so terribly. He delivered more than 250 speeches a year at over 200 colleges and universities, and that was at a time when it was not really vogue to go to colleges and universities if you were a conservative. It really took great courage. And we used to talk, and I said, you know, I think they're much more conservative than we know, and he agreed, but it just wasn't something that was happening because the radical left would do very bad things, very dangerous things. But Charlie set up chapters on 2,200 campuses and spoke at more than 1,000 churches. He launched a podcast and radio show that grew to an audience of 1 million Americans a day, one of the bigger shows on radio. And Charlie didn't just bring young people into the movement. All of a sudden, it started to grow by leaps and bounds. By 2024, we won more young people than any Republican candidate in the history of our country, including, for the first time, a majority of males under 30. Can you believe it? Remember when Republican presidential candidates would get 4%? No, we did unbelievably with young people. And he was a big, big factor. Unbelievable. But he made me work for it. Sir, you have to make a speech here, you have to make a speech there. But we did it, and we won, and our country is doing unbelievably well now. We had a country that was dead 1 year ago, and now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. And Charlie helped us make it that. One of the great people. But through it all, the core of Charlie's message and his basic method never changed. It never really changed. He stayed the same person also. At every campus event, Charlie asked the people who disagreed with him to come forward, and instead of silencing them, he handed them a microphone and let them speak. And he'd convinced so many of them. It was a pretty amazing thing to watch, actually. Shortly before Charlie arrived on campus, the day he was assassinated, a staff member texted him that there were many critics and students who were opposed to his views and rather strenuously in the crowd. And that actually made him feel good because he wanted to convince them. He understood. He really did. He understood what was right. And he was right about that. A lot of it was based on common sense, by the way. Charlie wrote back to the staff member saying, "I'm not here to fight them. I want to know them and love them, and I want to reach them and try and lead them into a great way of life in our country." In that private moment on his dying day, we find everything we need to know about who Charlie Kirk truly was. He was a missionary with a noble spirit and a great, great purpose. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erica. But now Erica can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent. Charlie's angry. Looking down, he's angry at me now. He wasn't interested in demonizing anyone. He was interested in persuading everyone to the ideas and principles he believed were good, right, and true. Before each appearance, he prayed these words: "God, use me for your will." Always said the same thing: use me for your will. And that is exactly what God did. When you think, that's exactly what he did. The more success Charlie had, and he was getting more and more successful, the more dangerous his mission became. On campuses all over the country, his quest for open dialogue was met with menacing hate. There were bomb threats, pulled fire alarms, and countless rage-filled radicals who tried to shout him down. It was nasty. I used to say, "Charlie, this is nasty stuff you're doing." At one event, police had to build up of thugs. Many of these people, by the way, are paid a lot of money to do this. They're agitators. They're paid agitators. Remember that. When you see they all have the same beautifully printed sign, every sign is identical, comes out of a top-level print shop. That's not the signs that are made in somebody's basement. Those are paid for by very bad people, and hopefully we're going to be finding out through the DOJ who those people are. At another college, Antifa terrorists shattered windows, threw rocks, and tried to storm the building where Charlie was speaking. It was a really bad one. Often dozens of police officers were needed to prevent left-wing violence. And the violence comes largely from the left. You don't hear that from too many people, do you? And virtually every day for years before he was murdered, Charlie received these horrible death threats. People don't know. I used to talk to him about it. He said, "I got some threats." He always felt that when they actually made the threat, they were not the ones to worry about. The ones to worry about were the ones that don't make the threats. And I think you know what I mean. He knew the risk, but he and I shared a certain motto: never back down and never ever surrender. Just don't surrender, never back down. He believed in it so strongly. So strongly. And he's right. He's totally right. The radicals and their allies in the media, sometimes referred to, as my son said, the fake news media, tried to silence Charlie for a simple reason: because he was winning, and he was winning big. He was taking over college campuses, colleges that had, in theory, only very liberal, or as they like to say, progressive. I call them liberal, but they like to call themselves, because such a beautiful word, progressive. They're the opposite of progressive, if you think about it. But they were really nasty, and he would go into these colleges. All of a sudden, within 2 years, 3 years, they turned into bastions of conservatism. It was really quite amazing to see. They lied about him because they did not want you to listen to him or to learn from him, because what he was talking about and even preaching made so much sense. Everywhere he went, he won the debates, he won the hearts, he won the minds, and yes, he won the elections for people. He helped us, he helped other people. We won the biggest election in the history of our country, I believe. Charlie Kirk was without a doubt among the most influential figures in the most important election in the history of our country. The election of, oh, that beautiful day, November 5th, 2024. Do you remember that day? It was 9 months ago. What a day that was. I mean, we had a pretty good day in the first one. And I must tell you, on the second one, we had a phenomenal day. But a lot of bad things happened. And now that's not even questioned. They cheated like dogs. But we got them back, didn't we, huh? Got them back. But we owe Charlie a profound and eternal debt of gratitude now. Just like Charlie and Erica made Turning Point hot, we are looking at a country that has the chance to attain a level like never before. Tariffs are making us rich again, richer than anybody ever thought was possible. And the only one challenging them are people that hate our country or foreign countries that are paying a price, because they did the same thing to us for years. They took advantage of us, but we're making money. We're becoming richer and richer. And we're taking care of our people better and better when we do that. And we can take care of other countries better and better. But we're doing unbelievably well. The tariffs have really been a hold. The election was big, but the tariffs, because of the election, came in. And remember, other nations do that to us. And Charlie understood that. He saw the money. He saw what was coming into our country, and we can use that for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all of these things that we fight so hard for. And that's exactly what's happening. The numbers are incredible. When the news finally came out on election night last November that the race was officially won, came out pretty early in the night. Charlie was live on camera. In that moment, he was overcome with emotion. I've never seen him like this. He was so happy. For a long while, he said nothing. His eyes were filled with tears, and then he buried his face in his hands and he started crying. That wasn't the Charlie I knew, but in thinking about it, it actually was the Charlie I knew, because he had a tremendous heart. He just wanted what was good for our country, and he saw us going in such a horrible direction. Lovingly, Eric, and this was so beautiful, Erica put a MAGA hat on to cover his bowed head. I like that very much. MAGA, we love. Does everybody love MAGA? Make America Great Again. When Joe Biden used to get up, remember the speeches? We will stop MAGA. We will stop MAGA. You know, he could barely get the words out. We will stop. I said, can somebody inform him the MAGA means Make America Great Again? How do you say you're going to stop it? And Charlie understood that. When Charlie finally looked up and spoke, he smiled through the watery eyes and simply said, I am humbled by God's grace. That was his statement that night. I was watching him. I was very impressed, actually. It showed he had a big heart. Every single American should take a long, hard look at the twisted soul and dark spirit of anyone who would want to kill a young man as good as Charlie. To kill anybody, but to kill a man like this, he didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve this. Our country didn't deserve this. And anyone who would make excuses for it are just out of their mind. Charlie's murder was not just an attack on one man or one movement. It was an attack on our entire nation. That was a horrible attack on the United States of America. It was an assault on our most sacred liberties and God-given rights. The gun was pointed at him, but the bullet was aimed at all of us. That bullet was aimed at every one of us. Indeed, Charlie was killed for expressing the very ideas that virtually everyone in this arena and most other places throughout our country deeply believed in. But the assassin failed in his quest because Charlie's message has not been silenced. It now is bigger and better and stronger than ever before, and it's not even close. And it's rare that such a thing happens, but Charlie is bigger today than he was, think about it, just 2 weeks ago. He's bigger today than he was 2 weeks ago. Now, that may not help his friends and loved ones, of which there are so many. It may not help Erica and those beautiful children who have to suffer so horribly through this moment, but they know it's true. He's bigger now than ever before, and he's eternal. He's eternal. And I just want to say we love him. And he's looking down at us right now, and he's saying, wow, that's a great crowd. He's saying, that's a great crowd. And it's a great crowd of patriots. But that's why I will soon award Charlie the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It's the highest civilian honor. And we will do the ceremony at our beautiful White House in a very safe Washington, D.C., a place that Charlie truly revered. You know, we stopped the crime in Washington, took 12 days. Now you can go to restaurants, you can walk down the middle of the street with your wife. You can have your wife walk alone down the middle of the street. She's going to be in good shape. What a difference. What a difference good management really makes. But it's, I'm so proud of that Washington, D.C. You know, it's one of the worst in the nation, in the world. And now it's considered a very safe city. And it's also, I passed it yesterday, I went through it, and the lawns are good. It's like a different place. It's like the tents are gone, the threats are gone, the gangs aren't there. We got rid of, you know, we took out 1,500 career criminals, 1,500. If you have 3 career criminals, that can make a big difference. But I'm so proud of Washington, D.C., and now we're going into Memphis. And we'll get that one straightened out fast. And then we're going into some others, but we're going to go to Chicago, and we're going to have Charlie very much in mind when we go into Chicago. And we'll get that one straightened out. You have an incompetent governor who, he thinks it's okay when 11 people get murdered over the weekend. He thinks you don't have any crime when 11 people get murdered and 28 people get shot. He says he's got crime. No, they don't have it under control, but we'll have it under control very quickly. So we're going to be doing that. And Charlie loved what we were doing. He was so proud of what happened. He was there to see it. He's so proud of what happened in Washington, D.C. As you know, the depraved assassin who planned and executed Charlie's killing has been arrested and charged with capital murder. God willing, he will receive the full and ultimate punishment for his horrific crime. Terrible thing. Because you can't let that happen. You can't let that happen. Can't let it happen to a country. The Department of Justice is also investigating networks of radical left maniacs who fund, organize, fuel, and perpetrate political violence. And we think we know who many of them are. But law enforcement can only be the beginning of our response to Charlie's murder. Over the last 11 days, we have heard stories of commentators, influencers, and others in our society who greeted his assassination with sick approval, excuses, or even jubilation. You've heard that. So have I. Couldn't believe it. Some of the very same people who spent the last 8 years trying to sit in moral judgment of anyone who disagreed with them about politics suddenly started cheering for a murder. Incredible. You know the names. They're major losers, by the way. That will be proven out in a short period of time. Some of the very people who call you a hater for using the wrong pronoun were filled with glee at the killing of a father with 2 beautiful young children. And the same commentators who this week are screaming fascism over a canceled late-night TV show where the anchor had no talent and no ratings, last week were implying that Charlie Kirk deserved what happened to him. No side in American politics has a monopoly on disturbed or misguided people. But there's one part of our political community which believes they have a monopoly on truth, goodness, and virtue, and concludes they have also a monopoly on power, thought, and speech. Well, that's not happening anymore. We've turned that corner very quickly. Tragically, atrocities of this kind, and the kind that we saw in Utah, of all places, are the eventual consequence of that kind of thinking. If speech is violence, then some are bound to conclude that violence is justified to stop speech. And we're not going to let that be justified. The tradition of reason and open debate that Charlie practiced is not a pillar of our democracy. In many ways, it's the basis of our entire society. It's the right and inheritance of every free American, the greatest legacy of the Enlightenment, and among the most treasured achievements of civilization. We will defend it at all costs, and we will carry forward the torch of liberty that Charlie Kirk held so proud and so high. He was so proud, and he did hold that torch high. We will never, ever let it fail. We will never let it fail. But we're going to raise it higher than ever before. It's going to be raised, and this is the beginning. Perhaps it should be no surprise that Charlie, who spent his life speaking with the critics of these traditions, ultimately became convinced that we needed not just a political realignment, but also a spiritual reawakening. We did. And we have to bring back religion to America, because without borders, law and order, and religion, you really don't have a country anymore. We want religion brought back to America. We want to bring God back into our beautiful USA like never before. We want God back. Charlie would have been so pleased to hear his friends and colleagues today giving testimony and giving glory to God. Within minutes of the gunshot in Utah, millions of Americans, young and old, heard the news and dropped to their knees and started praying. Even many who rarely prayed asked God for a miracle. Please, God, save Charlie. But although Charlie's time with us on earth has ended, those prayers for a miracle have already been answered. Look at what's happening. Look at what's happening. In the days since Charlie's death, we have seen how his legacy has touched so many millions around the world. In Calgary, Canada, thousands gathered at City Hall to sing the American national anthem and raise up posters with the name Charlie Kirk. In Seoul, South Korea, crowds gathered to wave American flags and shout, "We are for Charlie Kirk." His memory has been honored in the streets of Berlin, Warsaw, Vienna, Sydney, Madrid, London, Tel Aviv, and all over the world. So beautiful to watch. A man as far away as rural Australia texted a pastor, "I'm going to come to church tomorrow for the first time ever." The pastor asked, "Why is that?" The man replied, "Because of Charlie Kirk." Can you imagine? The lesson of Charlie's life is that you should never underestimate what one person can do with a good heart, a righteous cause, a cheerful spirit, and the will to fight, fight, fight. Have to fight. We're saving our country. And Charlie's a big factor, such a big factor. Charlie Kirk started with only an idea to change minds on college campuses, and instead he ended up with a far greater achievement, changing history. He changed history. Today, Charlie Kirk rests in glory in heaven for all eternity. He has gone from speaking on campuses in Wisconsin to kneeling at the throne of God, where he is right now. We grieve for the friend and leader that we have lost, but we go forward strengthened by his faith and bolstered by his courage and inspired by his example to defend the country he lived for the freedoms he died for, and the values in which he so deeply believed. He believed in values that we should all believe in. Charlie created something very special. It's called Turning Point USA. And under the leadership and love of Erica, it will become bigger and better and stronger than ever before. So, Charlie, we all want to thank you. We want to say a very loud God bless you, Charlie. God bless you for what you've done is incredible. And God bless Erica and the children. God bless the United States of America. And could I ask Erica, please come out. Erica, please come out. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I said we'll have to cut Lee Greenwood a little bit short. How good is he, right? He's been with us right from the beginning. And I wanted to stand and listen to the entire song, but people would have said, look at the ego of that guy. He just wouldn't.